Okay, I mentioned earlier how there are a handful of stories about David at the end of Second Samuel that don't fit into the overall chronology of the story in the rest of the book of Second Samuel. Before we move on in Second Samuel chapter 9, we're going to skip ahead and read one of these stories at the end of the book of Second Samuel to help set the context for Second Samuel 9. This is Second Samuel chapter 21. We're going to be reading there's two different sections here in this chapter. We're going to be reading the first 14 verses. During the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. So David sought the face of the Lord. We don't know when exactly this happened. It was just during the reign of David. Don't know when, at what point during this reign. But there was a famine for 3 successive years, so David tried to figure out what was going on. The Lord said, "It is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death." We didn't read about this in 1 Samuel. But apparently this is something else that happened at some point along the way. The king summoned the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not a part of Israel, but were survivors of the Amorites. The Israelites had sworn to spare them, but Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to annihilate them. Again, we really didn't read about that in First Samuel, so I don't know exactly when that was supposed to have happened. Apparently, at some point in Saul's reign, these guys crossed his path in the wrong way for some reason, and he tried to exterminate them. These people are the ones that came to Joshua in disguise and got them to make a treaty with them. And this would have been, of course, in the days of the conquest in 1400 BC, so 400 plus years earlier. You can read about that in Joshua 9. These men come, they're disguised as far distant travelers, and Joshua 15, chapter 9, verse 15, Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. These are the same people. These are their descendants 400 plus years later. Apparently, Saul decided, he got the idea in his head that he could earn favor maybe with God or the people of Israel by exterminating these foreigners who were still living in their land. I don't know. We don't actually read about that in 1 Samuel, so we don't really know the details of any of that. Apparently, obviously, he didn't succeed. I'm not sure how far he went with it. I mean, we saw him exterminate the priests at Nob. So we know he had genocidal tendencies. So he may, I don't know how much damage he did, because we didn't read that account. That's not recorded for us anywhere, except for here. And even here it's just mentioned. It's not actually explained. But that's who those people were. These are the people that fooled Joshua into making a treaty with them way back when they first came into the land. And because of that, the Israelites are actually oath-bound to protect these people. Not only are they not supposed to exterminate them, they're actually supposed to protect them. That oath that they took with them is still binding to this day at this point in time. Because obviously, so Saul is not only committing a genocide, he is violating an oath, which is a big deal. Anyway, we don't have the story of that happening, but we'll have to take it for granted that it did happen at some point during Saul's reign. So, David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make amends so you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" So the problem is, the reason for this famine is that there's this lingering blood debt that Saul has accrued in his day when he unjustly attacked these Gibeonites, who not only were not called upon to be attacked, but were in fact protected by this oath that they had made with Israel 400 years earlier. So how do we solve this? Well, David's putting the question right to them. He is not asking of the Lord what the Lord's solution to the problem. Now, he did ask the Lord what the source of the problem was for the famine, but he is not consulting with the Lord about what to do about it now that he knows the problem. He's asking people themselves directly what they want to do. Because you know what men are like, aren't you? You know what sort of retribution these men are going to ask for, don't you? The Gibeonites answered him, "We have no right to demand silver or gold from Saul or his family, nor do we have the right to put anyone in Israel to death." Now they're foreigners; they don't have the same legal status as actual Israelites do. So David asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" They answered the king, "As for the man who destroyed us and plotted against us, so we have been decimated and have no place anywhere in Israel, let 7 of his male descendants be given to us to be killed and exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen." That got Saul's hometown. So they're going to pay him back right in his hometown. They're going to kill some of his family members and hang their bodies out where everyone can see them in his own hometown. So the king said, "I will give them to you." Now David had made a covenant. He had made a promise before that he would not exterminate Saul's family. Here he's coming pretty close to backtracking on that promise. He doesn't totally do it. He doesn't totally do it, but he is kind of threading the line here about not doing what he said he was going to do. Why do you have to do these things, Cat? In 1 Samuel 24, at the end of the chapter, Saul and David are having their confrontation after David spared Saul's life from when Saul was going in the cave to take a dump. And Saul says to him in verse 21, "Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." So David gave his oath to Saul. So David said he wasn't going to wipe out Saul's descendants. He doesn't do it. He doesn't do that. He does ultimately not. He does not do that. But he is coming kind of close here. He is kind of. This is another one of those things where, as king, he's not quite as. He doesn't have the same sort of youthful innocence and naivete that he had before he became king. Okay. Pre-King David had no trouble giving Saul his word that he wouldn't go after his family. But King David here has an opportunity to at least eliminate part of the family. He's not cutting it off completely, but he does have a convenient opportunity here to eliminate 7 potential rivals. So he's going to take it. He's going to take it. This is another example of how, as king, David's morals were a little bit more bent than they were back before he became king. We've seen a few examples of that already. This is another, of course, we're going to see a big one coming up. But as king, David had a little bit harder time always doing the innocent right thing than he had before he became king. The king spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord that between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. We'll talk about that specifically later on. But the king took Armani and another Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Ai's daughter Rizpah, whom she had borne to Saul, together with the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab. Remember, Saul had Merab and Michal. He wanted to give Merab to David in marriage, as she was the oldest. David said no to that. He ended up getting Michal instead. So Merab got married and had 5 sons with somebody, and now they're all going to get killed. Whom she had borne to Adriel, son of Barzillai the Mahalathite. He handed them over to the Gibeonites, who killed them and exposed them on a hill before the Lord. This is in Gibeah. This is in Saul's hometown. All 7 of them fell together. They were put to death during the first days of the harvest, just as the barley harvest was beginning. Rizpah, daughter of Ai, took sackcloth and spread it out for herself. So 2 of these 7 men are her sons. From the beginning of the harvest till the rain poured down from the heavens on the bodies, She did not let the birds of the air touch them by day, or the wild animals by night. Now, this is a violation of the command. So these Gibeonites were not doing this just to cleanse the land of blood guilt. Okay, they went above and beyond what they were supposed to do here. They went above and beyond what they were supposed to do here, so we know that their motivations were not entirely pure. They had an opportunity to get some revenge, and they took it. We read in Deuteronomy 21, verse 22, if a man guilty of a capital offense is put to death, and his body is hung on a tree, you must not leave his body on the tree overnight. Be sure to bury him that same day, because anyone who is hung on a tree is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. They let these bodies hang on these poles for days, if not weeks. So they had no interest. They even said to David they were going to expose the bodies. They even told him that. Now, David may not have thought they were going to leave them up there hanging for days and weeks on end. He may not have thought that. He probably didn't. You know, when he finds out about what happens, he seems to be a little bit surprised by it. But the Gibeonites clearly had every intention of doing this. So their motives for wanting to kill 7 of these men cannot be stated to be pure. They were not motivated strictly by a desire to cleanse the land of guilt. Okay, they wanted revenge. When David was told what Ai's daughter Rizpah, Saul's concubine, had done, he went and took the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from the citizens of Jabesh Gilead. Remember that? Okay, so Saul and Jonathan and 2 other Saul's sons all died in battle against the Philistines. They were beheaded and their bodies were abused and put on display. And the citizens of Jabesh Gilead went to get them. So they've had them, okay. And now David is finally going to give them a proper burial in their own hometown. They had taken them secretly from the public square at Beth Shan, where the Philistines had hung them after they struck down Saul on Gilboa. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan, and probably the other 2 sons that were also part of that package. There were actually 4 of them total. There was Saul, Jonathan, and 2 of Saul's other sons. They probably were included in this too. David brought the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan from there, and the bones of those who had been killed and exposed were gathered up. They buried the bones of Saul and his son Jonathan in the tomb of Saul's father Kish at Zelah in Benjamin, and did everything the king commanded. So they finally are giving Saul a proper burial. After that, God answered prayer on behalf of the land. So he did not answer the prayer after the deaths of these 7 men. I think that's another clue that the executions of these 7 men themselves were not pleasing to the Lord. First of all, David didn't actually inquire of God what to do about the famine. He inquired what the source was of the famine. But when he found out about what the problem was, he didn't inquire of God of what the solution should be. He let the Gibeonites tell him what they wanted to do. And the Gibeonites, as we can tell from them leaving the bodies hanging on these poles, impaled, spear. I don't know exactly what it meant. They weren't crucified. Okay, this is way before the era of crucifixion. Crucifixion won't come along for another 600 or 700 years. They're somehow stuck on poles. Okay. And the Gibeonites had every intention of leaving them there, and they did leave them there, and that is against the law. David should have known that. Now, he probably didn't know the Gibeonites were going to do that, but he should have known that the hanging a body on a tree was again. He probably did know. He just probably didn't know the Gibeonites were going to do that. So the Gibeonites were not in this just to cleanse the land of guilt. Okay, they were in this for personal revenge. And the famine actually does not get dealt with. The God does not heal the land until after all these bones are buried. He doesn't heal the land after the men are killed. He doesn't. He waits until after everything is buried, all of them are buried, then he heals the land. So I don't know. The text doesn't actually say. The text just kind of says what happened. It doesn't give any commentary or insight into it, but I don't think that this is meant to be like a stirring account of how wonderful David is here. I think this is another example where David is not not breaking his oath. Like he said he wasn't going to cut down Saul's family, and he's technically not cutting down Saul's family, but he is kind of playing somewhat fast with the rules. Like he can cut down a good number of Saul's family, which is convenient to him because Saul's family could still be a threat. It's like that's he has an opportunity here to kind of reduce the number of potential threats to his throne. He takes it. He takes it. Anyway, that helps set the stage now for this story in 2 Samuel 9. I can't tell exactly which is which happens first. Okay, but that understanding that story will help us understand this one a little bit better. This is 2 Samuel 9. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" So he's wiped out a good number of Saul's house. Not all of them, technically, but a good number of them. He technically has not violated his own oath not to cut off Saul's descendants, but he has wiped out a good number of them. So he's asking who's left. Now, there was a servant of Saul's household named Ziba. They called him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba, your servant?" He replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo Debar." So David had him brought from Lo Debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. Now, Mephibosheth might very well be thinking he's about to get put to death here. Now, he's not a threat to David at all. He has no legs. I'm not sure. Way back, we read about Mephibosheth back in. Was it the end of 1 Samuel? Or the beginning of 2 Samuel? I forget. Anyway, they had Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son, and when they were escaping, when he was young, he was I think 5 years old. When they were escaping the pursuing Philistines after the disastrous battle against them, somehow he fell and injured his feet, and apparently it was a lifelong injury. I don't know exactly how that. When you talk about these sorts of medical conditions, I'm trying to. Where does we actually read about this earlier, but I'm confused about where it was reported. Anyway, but I don't know, when it comes to these ancient texts trying to describe these medical conditions, well, you never really know. I mean, did his legs get broken and they just grew incorrectly after that? Was he paralyzed? You just never really know. How they didn't have terminology for all these different conditions that we have today. We read that story earlier about a guy whose hand froze to his sword. Well, his hand didn't really freeze to his sword. His muscles just tightened, got so stiff around the sword he couldn't let go of it. We read about Nabal, the guy that we met in 1 Samuel 25, the husband of Abigail. His heart became like a stone or something like that. Well, he had a coma. He fell into a coma. They didn't have terminology for those sorts of things back then. So whenever the ancient texts talk about things like crippled in both feet, it's hard to say exactly what the problem was. Were his legs smashed? Was he paralyzed? Were they just weak? Did he have to? I don't know. I just don't know. At any rate, he was disabled. He was disabled. And he would not have been a threat to David at all. Nobody would have rallied around a crippled king. So he is not in any way, shape, or form a threat to David. David said, Mephibosheth, your servant, he replied. Don't be afraid, David said to him. Mephibosheth assumes he's going to get killed here. For I will surely show kindness to you for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all. I guess this is Jonathan's only son. Jonathan died in battle with Saul on Mount Gilboa. I'm guessing this is the only son he had before that. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. Now this guy, Ziba, had been in charge of the estate, and now he's not any longer. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth, grandson of your master, will always eat at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. So this Ziba dude was pretty well off in his own right, and he had been in charge of Saul's estate, and now he's not. He's being demoted. He may not be too happy about that, huh? And then don't forget about him, because we're going to read about it. Ziba and Mephibosheth are going to come back into the story again later. They're not done yet. This isn't the last we're going to hear of these guys. Then Ziba said to the king, Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands the servant to do. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. So whatever Mephibosheth's problem was, whatever his ailment was, apparently it was not enough for him to not be able to have sex, or else he adopted this kid. But more likely this is his own son. And all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, because he always ate at the king's table, and he was crippled in both feet. So David allowed a good number of Saul's male descendants to be wiped out, but he saved one. He did go ahead and save one, a crippled one who's absolutely no threat to him whatsoever. But he did save one. He did honor his covenant with Jonathan, and he technically didn't break his covenant with Saul, even though he skirted the line on it pretty closely, I'd say. But you can see how David, as king, has a lot more shades in his morality than he did before he was king. King David, is not always as pure and innocent in his thinking and his dealings as pre-King David was. Even David, even the best of men, power corrupts. You know, it's like in the end, even the best of men are flawed.